But as things moved along, of course, you get the reaction to the reaction. And this is when Vaush and other people start coming in. There was a popular soft trans YouTuber who spoke out, explaining the issue with the fact that whilst the joke clearly caused harm, what's even worse than this is the way how everyone is responding, is trivializing, is ignoring the feelings and thoughts of trans people who have expressed their pain. What doubles this is the fact that all of this was taking place during Trans Remembrance Week, Trans Awareness Week, even. Trans Day of Remembrance is just the Friday. On this week that we're supposed to come together and celebrate, listening to trans experiences and everything like that, they were effectively being shut down. Everyone who was speaking out, no matter how generous they were being with Ollie, because again, some people were like, okay, just fuck you, Ollie, because again, this is not Ollie's first show. This is not the first time he's called something like that, and that's fair. There were also people who have like, okay, I know you're a good ally, but please, can you remove this tweet? This isn't good. Can you please understand why this is hurting to us? There was a full range of reaction here, and all of it was just being dismissed as woke scold, Twitter mob. And that's a problem. And that's when, of course, popular dirtbag YouTuber Vaush decided to step in and created a video.
Boy.
And this really spikes the abuse that members of the trans community were experiencing in expressing their thoughts. Vaush showed off various tweets by numerous trans folk, including the aforementioned soft trans. I just realized I haven't explained what a soft trans is. Soft trans is a label that I've only seen applied by cis people on the outside to refer to trans people who handle cis people with kiddie gloves. The same people would probably refer to me as a hard trans because my main objective here, as we say every day when we every fortnight when we start the show, is to create a space that's inclusive for trans people to show their full range of human expression. I'm a lot less about building bridges. I'm more about equipping trans people with the tools they need to stand up for themselves and giving them a space that they can come to and vent in, without constantly being harassed and sea-lined by cis people. A soft trans, on the other hand, is kind of a diplomat. A soft trans is someone who goes out there and is very good at handling cis people with kiddie gloves because much like the frail male ego, there's a lot of cis people who, the slightest of criticism completely sets them off in an unreasonable way, and they will condemn that as, abuse, etc. And that's what Vaush did to this notably soft trans YouTuber. This person who Vaush's progeny has mocked as a soft trans person. They were one of the people targeted. Vaush came in and read out 7 tweets. And this is really interesting. These are the 7 tweets that Vaush read out. Number 1, kinda cringe, bro. Number 2, this isn't funny. Sincerely, a trans person. Number 3, this is a joke only found funny by transphobic people. What does that say about the joke? Number 4, and this is the soft trans person I mentioned earlier, because of how things have unfolded over the past year, trans people expressing this tweet isn't cool are already being dismissed as the woke skull / cancel culture Twitter mob. So predictable. Tweet 5, transphobe is trans is not a joke cis people should make. You're a good ally, this ain't it. Tweet 6, let's not joke about this. Tweet 7, which is actually 2 tweets, I just put them into one. This is not a good joke, please actually delete. Then they went away, then they came back. It's been 12 hours, why isn't this deleted? And it's important to note that all the people just telling Ollie to delete this tweet. It's important for them to delete this tweet. However, those 7 tweets that I just read out to you, according to Vaush, are apparently the tweets of the cancel culture, woke scold, over-offended sensitivity baby mob. So it's like, so much of that criticism, including the "you're a good ally, but this ain't it," it was incredibly soft. Like, I have seen some pretty harsh comments, mostly from people that I know were hurt extremely badly in the whole Natalie thing, which, again, Ollie decided to go ahead and poke the hurt people and then wonder why they were angry at him. You know, a lot of these comments that Vaush read out are so soft, yet apparently even this is too much. Apparently you can't even say these things about cis people, or you're the evil bad guy. And I don't know if you want to add anything on that aspect, or it just completely shuts down discussion, because like how are you supposed to talk about these things?
This issue is like giving me like flashbacks. To anyone who doesn't know, I kind of like sucked as a person before I met Ethel. I used to unironically watch Vaush, and he was very big on this idea of you shouldn't get too offended. You have to be able to deal with people being edgy. And like, yeah, he was so sensitive about people calling him out or being like, quote unquote, offended, that such mild criticisms as "I don't like this" were seen as this horrible attack. It's ridiculous.
Even people who called him a good ally, yet just said like this isn't a good thing. Like, they completely disconnected Ollie from the wider picture of everything Ollie has ever done, and said like this doesn't reflect you, but like can you please think about removing it or just don't do it. Apparently that's too far. Apparently.
Oh yeah. Would you like to hear my thoughts on on Vaush's video? Because I watched the whole thing and I have a lot of notes.
I have notes as well. So, like, have you done it by argument, or?
I kind of just wrote things down roughly chronologically.
Okay, I've got chronologically as well, so I can like.
You've been talking for a bit, so can I take this one?
Sure, go ahead.
And then if I miss anything, yeah. Okay. So the first thing something I noticed about halfway through watching the video that I really want to highlight. I really want to highlight is that Vaush never actually engages with any specific arguments trans people put forward. Vaush, he reads those 7 tweets. None of those tweets have arguments in them. He doesn't go looking for ones that actually have like an explanation of this is what is wrong. Yet he jumps straight to explaining why trans people are wrong and too sensitive and seeing things that aren't there when he doesn't even know what our arguments are. It was somewhat reminiscent of the chat in the stream a few days ago, where people are just like, "Oh, I can't believe you have a problem with this. How could you think this, this, and this?" And I'm just sitting there thinking, I don't think any of those things. Thank you. Yeah, so Vaush begins by talking about harm versus offense. And for a second, I thought, oh, that's fair. Harm isn't the same thing as being offended. Then I realized, hang on a second. Why shouldn't people's offense be taken into consideration? I understand that you don't necessarily want to do whatever someone asks you to do just because they're offended. There are times when you might decide this doesn't have enough merit in this particular situation. Like, there's some nuance around it that you can make decisions either way. But the idea that being offended is not something that should even be taken into consideration can never be a reason you can decide, I don't want to make that joke. It is a bit, it seems wrong to me, especially because Vaush admitted, he doesn't like being offended. But then trans people are supposed to endure being offended all the time, no matter what. It's okay for people to be upset and to decide they don't want to be upset. You shouldn't be able to upset people just because you feel like it.
Mm-hmm. And as noted, like, there is an impact this is going to have. This is making people feel unwelcome in certain circles and certain communities. Yes, offense is something, but it's like, when people are offended, okay, there might be an unjust reason, there might not be like any basis to it. But in this case, it's quite clear that people being hurt and offended by this and like stating that, hey, I'm no longer feeling safe here. It's a lot like pulling your hand away from like a lit stove because it's suddenly hurting you. There's that pain, but like the damage, it like persists from that.
Like, honestly, I hate how there's this focus on, oh, there has to be demonstrable damage. Can you point to the person who was harmed, in a systemic way, or is it enough that people are upset? Do you really want to go through your life every day being upset by things, just being expected to put up with them? I've had to live with that. It's not healthy. Even if it really is just you don't like how this makes you feel, that should be taken into consideration. People should pause and think, is this joke making people feel yucky? Even if, there's not any, big, scary, real harm from it. Even if it really is just people don't like it. I think that should be respected.
People keep saying in the chat that it's not just about harm, it's about everything. Like, we're straw manning Vaush. It's not just about harm, it's about like you need to actually show it's not just about offense, you need to show more, etc. The thing is, Vaush claimed to have read every single tweet in that thread, and many of the reasons I just went over of active demonstrable harm were just ignored. He only read out ones that didn't give an argument. They just said, hey, this isn't it, so you say we're straw manning him, but no, we've pointed out the fact that he lied and that he ignored the actual points that were being discussed completely. So if you want to take issue with anyone, go take issue with Vaush. Sorry, continue.
Wait, that's such a straw man. It's not that being offended is not a valid measure of being hurtful conduct. It's that it cannot be the only one to determine the hurt. No, that's not what he said. He said he doesn't care if people are offended. Yeah. Have you seen Vaush before? Have you seen Vaush before? He doesn't care if you're offended. Okay, but if you want to talk about harm, that is my next point, is Vaush says the joke isn't doing harm because no one who wasn't, like, this is a quote, no one who wasn't already transphobic was made transphobic by this joke, unquote.
Nobody said that. Nobody said
that. Here's the thing. This is an impossible standard. Mm-hmm. No joke can make a genuinely non-bigoted person bigoted. That can't happen. Mm-hmm. So Vaush is setting the bar way too high here. And he's also ignoring the very obvious thing of this joke isn't going to make anyone a transphobe if they're not already. But it can further ingrain transphobia that's already there. It can embolden transphobia that's already there. In fact, when I went to the tweets to check the replies to see what trans people were saying, someone very helpfully included screenshots of people retweeting Ollie's tweet with things like the next Caitlyn Jenner and Trump is transitioning to an it. So there are people who are using this joke in transphobic ways right now. Mm-hmm. And that's just being ignored.
Yeah.
Because the bar has to be that this has to turn a completely non-transphobic person, who does not exist, by the way. There is no person who has no transphobia of any kind. Mm-hmm. Cis people all have transphobia they need to deconstruct. Trans people have internalized transphobia they need to deconstruct. I've got transphobia I'm still deconstructing because we live in a transphobic society. Mm-hmm. But if you did have a genuinely non-transphobic person, somehow, yeah, obviously this joke isn't going to make them transphobic. That doesn't mean it's not doing real demonstrable harm. Mm. We have people right now who are emboldened by this joke, who are using this joke in transphobic ways, and it's not even hard to find. You just have to check the quote tweets. This joke is doing harm. That's just a fact, and Vaush is ignoring that.
And what he's doing is he's doing harm whilst doing it as well, because like without basis, just in the middle of his video, he just goes out and asserts, well, I'm sure that most of the people taking offense to this joke are actually cis people. It's like,
yeah,
what basis are you doing that? That's just trans erasure. You're literally just erasing trans people to pretend like this issue isn't hurting a lot of trans people when those trans people are telling you it is hurting them,
Yeah, absolutely. He has no evidence for this. He just says that the people who are offended are cis, which... Why would the cis people be offended by it is cis people who are shutting down trans people right now. Mm-hmm. So he's just constructing this narrative of trans people aren't really offended in order to shut down trans people.
Which is funny because later on he goes on to assert that it's all trans people with internalized transphobia taking issue with the joke.
He's
He
very
he
inconsistent.
completely contradicts himself later on, saying that actually it's just the trans people being hypersensitive because they have internalized transphobia they haven't dealt with, and that's the actual cause of the issue. Nothing to do with Ollie, you know. So yeah, it's so all over the place. He then brings up the idea that the joke isn't transphobic, and he compares it to the attack helicopter joke, ignoring again the social context of declaring a sexual predator is a trans woman, even as a joke. Like, this is something people have been fed for years now. You know, they're constantly being fed, vote no on Proposition 8, Houston, Texas bill. You know, showing images of cis men breaking into women's bathrooms to rape women, etc.
Hang on, sorry. Andrew, Vaush isn't going to change his position from talking to us. That's just not going to happen.
That's the thing.
Vaush is an abuser. And also, like, I don't think either of us really want to talk to him because he has a habit of defending... not sure if I should say it's not in the... Yeah. He has a habit of defending pedophilia. Neither of us want to talk to him.
No. I'm dealing with enough on that stuff with Lily Orchard right now in the video we're working on. So, but like you saying, go talk to Vaush.
People have tried.
One second. When I came to this thread with just Ollie's joke, before Vaush got involved, I was going to have my say. Then I saw all of the wonderful people who had already deconstructed why the joke was harmful in detail, and I went, you know what? Me getting involved, being seen as a hard trans person, I'm not going to do it. And that's why I stepped back. I didn't say anything when Ollie first made the joke because so many other trans people had already done that. And I thought, hopefully, if it comes from them, if it doesn't come from me, because Ollie's going to fucking hate my guts after the fact that when Natalie lied and claimed that people went after him just because he was associated with her, when no, it's because he thought it was a great idea to tweet out a joke about how people were going to cancel him after the trans community started expressing their pain towards Natalie over the inclusion of Buck Angel, effectively prodding a hurt creature. Then he got his ass handed to him. You know, he's not going to listen to me because of that stuff, right? But other people are doing it. They tried to communicate him. That joke is still up, okay? So if Ollie isn't going to fucking listen, then why the fuck do you think I'm going to go and, you know, waste my mental health trying to deal with Vaush? Because one thing I was going to come around to after we dealt with the arguments and talked about the effects of the video. Do you remember that soft trans YouTuber I talked about? They're of comparable size to my channel. Do you know what fucking happened after Vaush did that video? They got hit by a torrent of abuse, they retracted all of their comments, and they've just retracted. Again, this is a soft YouTuber. This is someone Vaush targeted with his audience. So you're going to tell me and Levi to go and talk to a fucking abuser like that? Fuck you. No.
Oh, God. Hang on. Someone is just trying to... Okay. Catherine, I don't care what you think he said that was acceptable. Okay, saying that child porn would be used to keep pedophiles from abusing children doesn't work because they already have access to it through the internet and they still abuse children anyway. Also, fuck you. Fuck you.
There's five.
No.
There's 5 points of damage on child porn that I can just bring up. And it's just. But anyway, this is just yeah. I like the fact that people are defending this. Child porn can and does harm survivors of childhood sexual assault in that it triggers their PTSD and can make online spaces feel unsafe. It's a fact that communities that harbour this content have been observed to give predators a place to hide, with artists and writers that make these materials or who regularly commission such materials often being defended by, you know, the communities of these things when outers having groomed and assaulted actual minors. Then we have the fact that these materials normalize child rape, grooming minors on sites such as Twitter and Facebook into having a distorted and often romanticized view of child rape. The way in which these materials appear to desensitize the public to the issue of child rape and minimize said harm, feeding rape culture. And lastly, we do have the possibility that these materials reinforce a predatory consumer's inappropriate feelings towards children. Note that that was the last one. There are 4 things, 3 of which are solid facts we can demonstrate before we even get to that. Okay?
The other thing is, he didn't just say that, like, oh, it can be used to, like, prevent pedophiles from reoffending. He also keeps defending drawn child porn as, like, an art form.
Yeah.
Like, you can't, it's art. No real children are being harmed by it, therefore it's okay. He keeps bringing it up at really weird times. The reason I cancelled him, actually, is because I was watching his Resident Evil 4 stream to raise money for his kitten surgery, and I love Resident Evil 4 so much. I was like, oh, cool, a YouTuber I like is playing a game I love. This is great. And then he just randomly, for no reason, started defending child porn. And as a survivor, yeah, that's when I cancelled him. I wish I'd done it a lot earlier. He also said that the exploitation in child porn is comparable to the exploitation used in creating computers, which is obviously wrong, because you can create a computer without exploitation is not the product you buy when you buy a computer. The computer is the product you buy. So like he's going out of his way to defend child porn all the time. This isn't just a thing of he had like a slightly edgy approach to trying to reduce harm. No, he just really wants child porn to be okay. So I did not think this stream was going to be explaining why Vaush is a pedophile, but there you go.
Anyway,
he's a pedophile. He's also an abuser. I had someone saying I saw someone saying, "Oh wait, he's an abuser." And it's like, yeah, what we've been describing so far has been like gaslighting and intimidation, and like just the way he talks to his audience is abuse. I know it can be hard to see. I didn't see it when I watched him. It is absolutely abuse.
Continuing forward, like we come back to that point that I mentioned before about the fact that in his video, Vaush asserts that trans people, like all marginalized communities in his eyes, are projecting their own internalized transphobia onto Ollie, because apparently a cis person being transphobic is far less likely than a trans person being transphobic. This also feeds into that narrative, again, that the problem isn't with systemic transphobia, but individual internalized transphobia. It kind of doubles down on one of the implications of the joke.
It's the whole thing of, oh, we're not doing this to you, you're doing it to yourselves.
Yes. Why are you punching yourself?
Which, no.
Why are you killing yourself? Vaush ignores Ollie's dicey history with transphobia in the past, pretending like this isn't a cumulative conclusion. Also, one of the things he keeps on asserting that, Ollie is this wonderful person who, he's a wonderful, kind person. But here's the thing about this. Ollie knows that a large portion of the trans community has been harmed by his actions. If he truly were a kind person, even if he couldn't understand from the detailed explanations of why it was harmful that he was receiving. 1 second, we just received a donation. We just received a $5 donation from Zeravis. It's Zeravis? I'm sorry, I do not know how to pronounce. Glad I got to see your stream at 5 a.m. Odd question for you on this. If you said it in private to receptive trans friends, do you view it as an issue? Again, that depends on the rapport that he has with those friends, etc. Honestly, it's up for those friends and whether they have that rapport. This is not a private issue, though. Again, this is something he decided to do publicly. It reinforces sort of stereotypes. It's being used to abuse trans people already. So yes,
just to be clear, there's a difference between making jokes in private, making jokes in public, and making jokes among friends. You can get away with things that are not acceptable in public. For example, the other day I made a joke to my friend that being bi is just crypto gay, which is not a joke I'd ever make online because that can so easily feed into bi erasure and biphobia. But with my friend who's also bi, we get it. It's really funny, not so funny online. So, you can make all kinds of jokes with your friends, but you have to be really careful when you make it online, especially on a platform like Twitter where it's going to go places. And to all sorts of people.
Ollie is at the head of a large community that a lot of people consider leftist. Whether it is, that's up for scrutiny. But the thing is, again, when he saw the harm it was causing, he had a choice then and there. It's like the foot test. It's something I call the foot test. If you stand on my foot and it was an accident, and I tell you that, hey, you're standing on my foot, it's really hurting, and what's your immediate response? If you're a good person, your immediate response is to remove your foot. If you stand on my foot, however, and I say, hey, you're standing on my foot, and you decide, So what? I'm going to keep it there. It does not matter well what your initial intention was, even if it was an accident at first. At that point, you decide to keep the foot there, you decide to keep the harm, and you do not apologize. It is as good as if you did this thing with full intent. So when he got informed of the harm his tweet was causing, it is as good, when he decided to keep it up, as him going, okay, I want to post this transphobic tweet, knowing the backlash it's going to cause. So, he could have weighed up and decided, is this joke really worth the harm it's causing? And the right answer would have been no.
Speaking of harm, I screwed up a bit. I'm so sorry, Catherine. It turns out that, quote, when Vaush was evidencing Vaush supporting child porn, I misread it as a defense. So I'm sorry for that. I appreciate that you worded that poorly. I'm still kind of glad I did explain what he did, though, because not enough people know about that.
The Vaush goes on to assert that it's only a vocal minority without basis. Again, this is the claim to the silent majority without any evidence, which is a fascist technique really brought into view by people like Nixon. Vaush asserts that trans people who take issue with harmful content, such as Ollie's, should not be allowed in community spaces. He actually says that. He says the people responding to Ollie, like saying, hey, this has hurt me, should not be allowed in leftist spaces. Like, the joke, you're saying, makes people feel uncomfortable and they'll exclude themselves on that basis, and that is still harmful. Vaush is outright calling for anyone who criticized Ollie to be excluded from these leftist spaces. Because he says, like, people who criticize transphobia like this, oh, well, they're too sensitive, too toxic, etc., we need to get rid of them. Because apparently calling out transphobia is the real problem rather than the transphobia itself. Now, when it comes to what Vaush talks about what Ollie could have done, Vaush pretends like deleting the tweet is the only option as opposed to leaving it up.
No, he doesn't. No, he said that if Ollie deletes the tweet,
I'm getting to
trans
that.
people...
I'm getting to that. If you just wait and let me finish.
I'm sorry.
And he says this, and then he uses the argument that if he did delete it, trans people would say, oh, he's hiding the fact that he did this. When no, he can delete it and post an apology. There's that path there. You can delete the thing causing harm and immediately post something saying, hey, I'm sorry, and detailing exactly what he has learned, how he's going to make sure he never does this again, and again, just apologizing to people. There is that third option. But Vaush is like, he has to leave it up or he has to delete it, and if he deletes it, trans people are going to say he's deleting it to hide the evidence. No. If you create the post specifically talking about the tweet and apologizing, explaining all these things I just mentioned, not I'm sorry if my tweet, like, if you took offense at my tweet, not a bullshit apology like that, actually explaining the harm that you caused and what you learned and how people explained it to you, etc. That is a valid option. That would be him showing that he actually cares about what he is doing, he cares about the people he has hurt, whilst also showing that no, he's not just deleting it and running away, as he did with the jab when Natalie was getting dragged out. It's just, Vaush just wants, fan bases to be completely uncritical of creators. Like, he is fucking libertarian in this regard. He wants there to be zero consequences for anything anyone ever does. If you at all criticize it, then you are toxic and need to be removed from the community. Even if you start by saying, hey, you're a great trans ally, but this isn't it, that is too toxic and you should be excluded for saying that. So, yeah.
I also noticed Vaush, he kept drip feeding this narrative of like, oh, the trans people in my audience probably won't be offended because they're used to me being edgy, and like,
but that's survivorship bias.
It's survivorship bias. I think also he might have just been blatantly lying about how his audience tends to react. But like, I could see there was this praise. There was this praise throughout the video of like, if you don't object to this, then uh, you're one of the good ones, which is it's just so toxic.
Yeah.
Did you talk about when someone suggested why they think trans people are offended
Yes, I hadn't
with no
covered that
evidence?
point. Someone came along and suggested that they thought people were offended because they thought the joke was saying that like that Trump deserved to be a trans person to be effectively tortured, like for all the abuse that they're responsible for. Which I did see one tweet in that regard, but it was someone joking along with it. I didn't see anyone actually taking that as an issue. I saw, I forget their name. I'll have to go look it up in a second. But yeah, someone, like the one person who made that remark was someone joking about it. In like, oh yeah, I kind of wish that Trump was made to go through it. That was someone responding to Ollie in support. So like, I haven't seen any of the stuff he said.
Yeah, but despite this, Vaush immediately starts, well, first of all, throwing out ableist slurs because, of course, this is Vaush, and like immediately starts psychoanalyzing trans people. Oh, if anyone who does that is just overly sensitive and bad, and trans people are bad, and trans people are too sensitive. This is despite the fact that he had no evidence that anyone was making this point.
It was Katie Montgomery, by the way. She was the one who tweeted that she wished, partly wished Trump would go through it. That was it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like something she would do. Yeah. So like, it's like watching the video. It's like Vaush was just looking for an excuse to get angry at trans people and call us mentally ill and too sensitive. And he really wasn't interested in listening to trans people. It's basically between that and everything else. He didn't want to listen to trans people. He didn't want to actually engage with any of our issues. He didn't want to learn. He was just looking for excuses to hate on us and tell us why we were wrong and just file on that gaslighting, that emotional abuse. And I hate it. He's so toxic.
And again, like so many of the trans people that he like showed and read out, and they're absolutely like benign tweets, were suddenly being targeted by Vaush's fans, and some of them, like again, like they just retracted. They just like went into hiding. They just removed their comments, their tweets, etc. And yeah, like Vaush silenced a bunch of trans people during Trans Awareness Week.